Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 544. The Martyr Poets did not tell. Now, in many ways, this is one more of those poems that will, for us, remind us of why it is that we called our series Chats with Emily. Now, in many ways, we're back to poem possibly 449. You guys will maybe remember when we played this game together in our earlier study. I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth. Themself are one, we brethren are, he said. And so as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names. Now, this poem, we believe, is in reference to an Elizabeth Barrett Browning poem. And you'll remember in our comments back to 449 when we commented on it then, that Browning's poem, she says this, quote, "These were poets true, who died for beauty as martyrs do, for truth the ends being scarcely two." Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. Hopefully you worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm also hopeful that you've already read our previous 543 poems to set. We just finished with 543, I Fear a Man of Frugal Speech, to set this poem in the context of other studies that we've already done. Here, we're going to not be surprised when we hear this. This is another poem about the value of art and artists, and more particularly, the suffering poet, as it's sometimes referred to. Here we'll have, in this regards, Emily maybe identifying with a certain group of martyrs, if you will. The martyr poets did not tell, but wrought their pang in syllable, that when their mortal name be numb, their mortal fate encourage some. The martyr painters never spoke, bequeathing rather to their work, that when their conscious fingers cease, some seek in art the art of peace. Now, of course, as lovers of Emily, we love this art of peace line. We love the idea that art can be about trying to promote peace and unification and understanding and the like. Notice, though, we begin with martyr poets. We think, of course, of the phrase warrior poets, no doubt. Martyr poets, in other words, those who died for a cause. By the way, this will take us back to poem 38. You'll remember our study there. And when we get to poem 792, she'll play a similar game. We'll come back to this poem when we do 792. Through the straight paths of suffering, the martyrs even trod, their feet upon temptation, their faces upon God. A stately shriven company, convulsion playing round, harmless as streaks of meteor upon a planet's bond, their faith the everlasting troth, their expectation fair, the needle to the north decree, waves so through polar air. Now, the idea of the martyr poets are those who die for a cause they believe in. They didn't tell. Now, of course, what do we say about great writers and great poets? They show, don't tell. And here, notice she'll play a similar game. Of course, the fact of not telling leads us to the idea of Chats with Emily, our subject, our series title, as well as the idea, this is a woman who spent much of her adult life not telling, right? As in her recluse mode, as some have called it. The martyr poets did not tell, but what did they do? Wrought, it's an interesting word. Their pang in syllable. By the way, notice the rhyme scheme as well here of tell and syllable, of numb and some. You can kind of see the game she's playing. That when their mortal name be numb, we could say even dumb, right? As in speechless. Their mortal fate encourage some. Now this is interesting. Emily argues that the great poets, the martyr poets, they wrote what they wrote to encourage others, right? What is it Longfellow says in Psalm of Life? Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time, footprints that perhaps another sailing a lifestyle will make a forlorn and shipwrecked brother seeing shall take heart again. Emily playing in a very similar vein. Then, interestingly, she goes from poets to painters. Now, we've seen Emily play this game already a couple of times. The martyr painters never spoke. Notice from did not tell to never spoke. Bequeathing rather to their work, notice capitalized, that when their conscious fingers cease. I can't help but read this line and think about Thoreau's classic line from Walden, we must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by, what does he say, infinite expectation of the dawn that does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact, he says, than the unquestionability of a man to elevate his life by, what does he call it, a conscious endeavor. And I think here this use of her word conscious fingers makes sense as well. That when their conscious fingers cease, notice we go from names being dumb to their fingers ceasing. Some seek in art, and I think the word seek is the key word of the poem, because this is what all great artists do. They seek, right? The art of peace. And I think at 2a, I think this is the point, that true art is born of true suffering. But the point of that art, whether it be in writing or in painting, is about taking suffering and using that suffering as a propedeutic, didactical instruction. At 2b, of course, the rhyme scheme we pointed out. At 3a, the great biographer Wisher, when treating this poem, says about Emily, quote, "Poetry was her playmate, not her taskmaster, and she came to it with a sparkle in her eye and mischief on her lips," end quote. I love that line. Now, and of course, 792 does come to mind here, as well as we've said. When we study it, we'll come back to it. And finally, to own a poem like this at 3a, what was a time when for you suffering helped to produce great art, either in yourself or in another? Obviously, Emily is a classic exemplar of this, right? Thank you.